Joe Burrow is becoming a star on one of the worst teams in all of football in the Bengals. But all of this didn't come easy for Joe, and the reason he's here now is because he didn't let anything get in his way. Here's the story of Joe Burrow.
Here's the quarterback Burrow, looking for a block, and he got it up in the front by Hopkins into the end zone. Touchdown! What a scamper!
Joe Burrow was born in Ames, Iowa on December 10th, 1996. His father, Jim Burrow, at the time, was the Ames High School assistant head coach, after working for nearly a decade with the Iowa State Cyclones as a defensive backs coach. Funny enough, his father played in the NFL for the Packers and then bounced around the CFL before coaching. Upon that, his grandmother set a Mississippi State basketball record with 82 points in a game. Upon that, his grandfather played basketball at Mississippi State, and his uncle played football at Ole Miss, along with his two older brothers also playing football at Nebraska. As you could probably tell, sports, and specifically football, were in Joe's blood from the beginning. When Joe was only 6 years old, he went to the 2002 Rose Bowl, as his father was an assistant coach for Nebraska who was playing against Miami. The experience of going to the game led Joe to start wanting to play football and in turn join a youth football team, but unlike his uncles, brothers, and father, he didn't play defense. Joe started where he still is now, at quarterback, because no one else could play the position. His family moved to North Dakota for a while as his father was the coordinator for North Dakota State. One day, when Jim went into future Central Michigan's head coach Dan Eno's office, the coach told Jim that his son, Joe, had a future in football at only age 7. While Joe's a young kid, he moved around a lot until his family finally found their place in the Plains, Ohio after only 2 years in North Dakota. The family moved for, you guessed it, his father getting a job for the University of Ohio as a defensive coordinator. Burrow was able to stay in Ohio and went to Athens High School, and you guessed it, he played some football over there. His freshman year, he played on JV and went off and balled out enough to not only get on varsity as a sophomore, but also start in all 13 games. As a sophomore, Joe showed why he was destined for football, and in his first year as a starter on varsity, he passed for over 3,200 yards and 47 touchdowns. No, you didn't read that wrong. He threw for 47 touchdowns in only 13 games, along with only 8 picks. Joe nearly averaged 4 touchdowns a game on varsity as a sophomore. Oh, and by the way, he also ran for over 800 yards and 13 touchdowns. That year, as you would guess it, he led the school to a great season with an 11-2 record, and upon that to the third round of the playoffs, where they got killed 60-21 by Thurgood Marshall High School. Overall, a pretty solid year, but Joe is a competitive dude and wanted to improve going into his junior season. Although it seemed nearly impossible, Joe went off once again. In his junior season, Joe proved once again that he could dominate the football field. That season, he threw for over 3,700 yards and 47 touchdowns once again. That season, Joe focused on passing the ball instead of running the ball crazy and risking injuries. Even though Joe didn't rush as much, he still had over 550 yards rushing and 9 touchdowns. That season, he led the team to a nearly perfect 12-1 record in the third round of the playoffs, where they got killed once again, 38-7 to Marion Franklin High School. Joe knew that his senior season was his last chance at playing high school football and played like he wanted to leave a mark. As a senior, Joe passed for over 4,400 yards and 63 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. In only 13 games, he threw for 63 touchdowns. That's only around 5 touchdowns a game along with 300 yards. Upon that, he somehow ran for over 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. As a senior, Joe had over 5,000 total yards and nearly 70 touchdowns. These are some video game stats. Honestly, I don't think I could have these stats in a video game. As you would guess, he led the team to a 14-1 record, and they went all the way to the 5th round of the playoffs, where they barely lost 56-52 to Central Catholic. Surprisingly enough, Joe was also a phenomenal basketball player, and his senior year, he was even named first-team All-State as a point guard. I'm sure Joe was pissed that he didn't get to win it all, but he was able to get his name out there after that incredible senior year. And although his team was only Division III, he won the Ohio Mr. Football Award and Gatorade Player of the Year. Because he played in Division III, he was only a 4-star, but still the 8th ranked dual-threat quarterback in the nation. Some of the quarterbacks ranked ahead of him were Kyler Murray, Jarrett Stidham, and Sam Darnold.
3rd and 6. Here goes Darnold out. Picked off on the play. He may take it all the way. That's Xavier Rhodes on the way for a touchdown.
Joe got offers from all across the nation, from practically every big school you can think of, Alabama, Oregon, Michigan, etc. But as an Ohio kid, the one that stood out was Ohio State, even though he was going to be a backup to the trifecta in Cardell Jones, JT Barrett, and Braxton Miller. Going into his freshman season, Joe knew that he wasn't going to be the big man on campus anymore, and would have to play backup to a backup to a backup. Joe understood all this and redshirted his 2015 season. Then, when Cardell Jones and Braxton Miller left for the NFL in 2016, he was able to back up JT Barrett, with little to no chance of replacing him. That season, Joe was able to get his first legitimate reps, and threw for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns with only 0 interceptions. Joe really didn't get too much love, but he was patiently waiting for JT to leave, so that he can fill in as the starter. The next year was Joe's 3rd season, but 2nd official year because of his freshman redshirt, where yet again he was a backup to JT Barrett, and this time only threw for 60 yards with no touchdowns. Joe was a super competitive dude, but he knew if he waited and was extremely patient, he would get his chance. Joe was finally ready to take the starting spot in his sophomore season, with JT leaving for the NFL. It was the moment that Joe had dreamed of as an Ohio kid playing football his entire life and dreaming of the day where he could start for the Buckeyes. That was until the Buckeyes recruited 4-star athlete Dwayne Haskins, who they liked way more than Joe, and were no doubt going to start over him. This created a tough decision for Joe. Stay with your childhood favorite team with the hope that one day you could start, or go somewhere completely new and be the star there. Joe ended up making the right decision, and although it was difficult, he left and traveled all over the country, but came down to 2 choices, either Cincinnati, whose QB I just made a video on, and LSU. A main reason that Cincinnati was so high on Joe's board was the fact that the head coach, Luke Fickell, was on the Ohio State staff in 2015 and 16 as a linebackers coach. Yet, Ed Orgeron was able to lure Joe to Death Valley with crawfish and a dream. As you can imagine, Joe made the right decision, and although Cincinnati is a good program, LSU was just a better fit for Joe and gave him much more opportunities to improve in a tough conference like the SEC. Many people forget that Joe started for LSU for 2 seasons, and in his junior season, he was able to play in 13 games and pass for over 2,800 yards and 16 touchdowns, along with only 5 interceptions. Upon that, he had nearly 400 yards rushing and 7 rushing touchdowns. That season, the team started off 5-0, and then lost a super close game against the number 22 ranked Florida. Following that loss, they won the next 2 games until they went up against Alabama, and didn't even put up a point as they lost 29-0. If that loss wasn't heartbreaking enough, the last game of the regular season for LSU was a loss to number 22 ranked Texas A&M 74-72 in one of the highest scoring college football games of all time that went into 7th OT. There were still some big wins that year though, as they beat number 8 ranked Miami to start off the season, number 7 ranked Auburn, and killed the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs 36-16. The team was able to go 9-3 and eventually make it to the Fiesta Bowl against number 8 ranked undefeated UCF. The game was brutal and Joe got hit really bad, but was able to return and lead the Tigers to victory 40-32. Many people say the hit was what created the beast within Joe Burrow the next season. And you know what? They might be right.
As Burrow remains on his back, 93 yards for the score.
Joe's father, Jim, retired before Joe's season as the defensive coordinator for Ohio in order to watch his son's last season in college football.
I mean, I loved coaching, but just to be a part of this at LSU with Joe was why I retired.
This and many other factors were foreshadowing a big year by Joe and the Tigers. Going into his senior season, Joe and his coach Big O were confident that LSU would put up 40 points a game after an incredible camp, and it turns out they were right. And all this craziness really began week 2 against number 9 ranked Texas. Both teams went back and forth, but Joe was able to lead the Tigers to a win 45-37, as Joe threw for 470 yards and 4 touchdowns, and even gave a little wave to the Texas student section. This win was when the college football world noticed LSU, and most importantly, Joe Burrow. LSU won the next 3 games, and then had another big game against Florida. That game, LSU showed up big and beat the Gators by 2 touchdowns, 42-28. LSU was confident that they were one of the best and carried that confidence with them as they beat Mississippi State and especially number 9 ranked Auburn, a game that they barely won 23-20. The next week was the biggest game of their season and was their chance to prove that they belonged. This game was away at number 3 Alabama. The game was back and forth with 2 of the best quarterbacks in all of college football, Tua and Joe, going at it, with Tua throwing for over 400 yards and 4 touchdowns with only 1 interception, and Joe throwing for just over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. The devastating loss from last season motivated LSU to win, and they did from the start, as LSU was winning the entire game, and the only reason the game was even within a touchdown was a garbage time TD by Tua. LSU ended up winning 46-41 and proved they were the team to beat. Following that game, LSU cruised through Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Texas A&M, another revenge game that they won 50-7. To finish off the season, LSU matched up against Georgia in the SEC championship game, a must-win for number 1 ranking in the college football playoff, and they won big 37-10, with Georgia standing no chance from the start as LSU dominated the team on both sides of the ball. To start off the college football playoff, LSU went against number 4 Oklahoma, a game that was never even remotely close, and LSU won 63-28, with Joe Burrow throwing for a record 7 touchdowns in the first half, along with nearly 500 yards. After that win, LSU made it to the big game against number 3 Clemson in their backyard at the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. From the start of the game till the end, LSU was never in a real risk of losing, and they went on to win 42-25. After all the struggles for Joe and LSU, they'd done it and won the championship in a stellar fashion.
It's a trifecta that very few have achieved. Win the Heisman, perfect season, national championship.
Now let's take a look at Joe's year. Joe passed for over 5,600 yards and 60 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions, along with over 350 yards rushing and 5 rushing touchdowns. I wasn't joking when I said that Joe might have had the best season of any college football quarterback of all time. As you could probably guess, Joe won the Heisman.
Recipient of the Heisman Memorial Trophy is Joe Burrow, Louisiana State University.
But not only did he just win it, he won it practically unanimously. What's cool is Joe used the platform to talk about the struggles of Athens, Ohio.
There's so many people there that don't have a lot, and I'm up here for all those kids in Athens and in Athens County.
Joe's speech inspired thousands of people to donate over $450,000 to local food banks all across Athens. That year, along with winning the Heisman, Joe won the Maxwell Award, Walter Camp Award, Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, Davey O'Brien Award, Lombardi Award, and Manning Award. Following the championship game against Clemson, many fans knew exactly where Joe's going. Number 1 overall to the Cincinnati Bengals.
With the first pick in the 2020 draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Joe Burrow, quarterback, LSU.
Cincinnati has been an awful organization that had the number 1 overall pick for a reason. Along with a brand new coach who only had 1 year of experience, Joe didn't really care whether or not he was on a good team, and I'm sure he was very happy he didn't even have to leave Ohio. The 2020 offseason was a little different from many other years, and Joe had to learn a whole new game and lead a team without a real offseason due to the virus. No matter the situation, Joe was motivated to lead the Bengals out of the dumpster fire that they were in, and so far he's done well. Actually amazing considering his situation. So far, Joe has led the Bengals to a 2-6-1 record, with a big win over the Titans and Jaguars, and somehow a tie against the Eagles. This season, Joe has thrown for nearly 2,500 yards, 12 touchdowns, to only 5 interceptions, and also rushed for over 100. Whether or not Joe ends up winning the award, he has proven he belongs in the NFL, and he could be one of the best to ever do it.
I'll never adjust or accept losing.
Thanks for watching the video, subscribe and like for more videos like this, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. By the way, comment down below how you feel about Joe and the Bengals, and peace out.